cunning idea. You see? So that would be my answer without going into further elaboration, because if you want further elaboration, we need a schoolroom or a teaching room setting.
Well, just tell me this then. The Hebrew or the Jewish Bible consists of the Torah, right? The Old Testament. What does that consist of?
No, see, you mean the Torah?
Isn't the Torah and the Old Testament the same?
No. No.
Explain.
The Old Testament, what they call in the Old Testament, is strictly for Christians. Mm-hmm. Okay, which is called the Pentateuch, or the first 5 books of Moses of the Old Testament. That's strictly for Christians. Okay, and that's what they put it out there for. Mm-hmm. in 1475. The Torah has altogether different language in the creation of the Torah. This Torah was created for the very first time by one Solomon Bar Isaac, today called Rashi, who created what is known as the Sefer HaYasa literature, and I explained what Sefer HaYasa literature was all about. That's what he created in there.
Okay, all right. Now, then, what did the Christians, what was their book, or what was their teaching, if it wasn't the Old Testament? Because in the Bible, even the Catholic Bible, you got the Old Testament, and you got the New Testament. That makes up the teachings of Christianity. Then what was taught?
The teachings of Christianity, prior to Desiderius Erasmus, the playwright, ex-priest of the Roman Catholic Church, who is who created what is known as the Novum Instrumentum. Prior to his writings, or him coming out with the Synoptic Gospels, Mark, Matthew, and Luke, there was no, let's say, formula to teach Christianity. Only in the Roman Catholic Church, or these churches, these Christian churches, they, the minister would get up there, or the priest would get up there and preach homilies, which they florilegized, meaning they flourished it. Whatever they were talking about, they flourished it, but they had no written literature on it.
Now, what do you mean flourish?
Well, like you can take, like the ministers today, they tell you about Jesus was in the land of the wilderness, you see, and he had a hard time. He was over in Bethlehem. And they go on, and see, they can blow that up. Just that one thing. They can stretch it and stretch it and stretch it. That's called florilegizing it. That means to flourish it, embellish it, you see. So, but there was no written literature, simply because there was no printing press to print up written literature. Everything had to be handwritten. So the priests in the Roman Catholic Church spoke and preached homilies, not from any written literature, until 1516, when they came out with the Novum Instrumentum, the writings of one Desiderius Erasmus. Then they began to preach from those 3 Gospels, and then began to preach from those other 6 Gospels that Erasmus had created. 1 and 2 Peter, 1 and 2 Corinthians, Galatians, and Epistles to the Romans. Okay? So, the Roman Catholic priests had condemned the Old Testament, but Martin Luther condemned the New Testament. So it was a polemic there, you see, until Jacob Van Laersfeld came along and put the Old and the New Testament under one cover. They call it the Old Testament, or the Holy Bible.
All right. I just want to drop back a little further. So I'll let you go in a minute, but I gotta get an understanding of this. Then, if we're going back to the Coptic Christians, back to the Romans, who were supposed to have persecuted Christians and so forth, what was the Coptic Christians preaching, and what was Rome preaching, and what did Constantine incorporate, so that I get an understanding that it was different from Hebrewism and Judaism, and can separate it from a later version of the Bible?
Well, see, here's what you have to do, Clemson. You have to really understand that Judaism is not a BC religion. You have to really
Okay,
understand
I understand that.
No?
I'm wiping that out, but I'm just
Okay.
trying to get an understanding of now what would they, because they were doing something before then, because,
Before Rashi,
no, the Romans is supposed to have persecuted Christians.
what year? Starting with who?
Well, starting where the Romans ruled and what...
You're talking about during the time of Constantine?
Yeah, and before Constantine.
No, there was no Christianity before Constantine or during the time era of Constantine.
There
See,
wasn't.
that's a misnomer they put in history. Simply because they are teaching the people who are Christians and the whole entire world through their school system that this Jesus the Christ died in 30, they call it AD.
Correct.
Okay? So therefore, if you come up to the time of Constantine, there's supposed to be Christians there. We're talking about in the 4th century.
Right.
Okay? In the 4th century, there was no Christ, therefore no Christianity, nor a Christian church. You have to understand that. That's in my book also. You only get a Christ in history during the time of the Council of Ephesus. Ephesus is a city, or was a city, in Turkey, in northeast Africa. At the Council of Ephesus in 431 is when you get a Christ. Simply because you have to understand that this Christ image, it was known as Serapis then, it's in my book, was argued that this Serapis image, known today as Jesus Christ, had no human nature. So that argument was between Africans, who are the Melkite Africans, Coptic Egyptians, who were on the side of the Greek Ptolemies and the Roman rulers of Egypt. And you had the grassroots exterior community who were not on the side of the Romans. They would not embrace this religion, or they would not embrace that image that we know today as Jesus the Christ. Okay? So the polemic was that coming from the community of the exterior Coptic religious community, which is the monophysitic community. Monophysites mean a person who says that this Christ had no human nature. Okay? And in order to have a human nature, one has to be born through the body of a female. So what they did at the Council of Ephesus was to go into the ancient Egyptian divine triad. And that triad consisted of Osiris the father, Isis the Holy Hathor cow mother, and Horus Jr., the S-U-N, the son. They took Isis, our ancient Egyptian deity, Isis, out of that triad, and they discarded her, and in her place they created a creature called the Virgin Mary. Giving this created creature, the Virgin Mary, the title of Theotokos. And the word Theotokos means the mother of God. They amalgamated this created creature, the Virgin Mary, with this title Theotokos, with this created creature, Serapis, now known today as Jesus the Christ. And the Melkite Coptic African Egyptians, at that point of amalgamation, said that this image that we know today as Jesus Christ, then known as Serapis, is now the Messiah, A-S. And in Coptic spoken Greek, Messiah means Christos, or today in English, the Christ. So you do not get a Christ prior to the Council of Ephesus in 431 ABCE, and that's in my book. You do not get Christianity as a religion prior to the Council of Chalcedon, 451. That's in my book. Also, you do not get a Christian church. The world's first Christian church was built in Constantinople, Turkey by Justinian